She gave him a .25 caliber one day and asked if he could get rid of it for her. Dolly just can't stand to live in the same house where her husband was murdered. So at some point she moves to a new place and it has an attic, and within just a few months, she begins dating a lawyer named Herman S. Shapiro. He makes a lot of money in his job as an attorney, but he also works long hours and he doesn't have a lot of time to focus on Dolly, and this is a problem for her because she wants a boyfriend who is more attentive. So in no time at all, Dolly starts cheating on Herman, and her new boyfriend is a businessman named Roy Klum. He's originally from Milwaukee, which is where Dolly lived before she and Fred moved to LA together. So they must have some things in common. They get along well for just under a year, but in the summer of 1923, Dolly breaks up with Roy, and he does not take the rejection well. In fact, on July 12th, he goes straight to the police and says, "I need to tell you about Dolly and her husband's." Roy goes in and says that while he and Dolly were still together, she gave him a .25 caliber one day and asked if he could get rid of it for her. She told him that it had nothing to do with Fred's murder, but she knew it looked bad for her to own a that was the same caliber as the that killed her husband. He didn't ask any more about the weapon. He just tried to find a way to destroy it for her. Roy actually threw the in the La Brea tar pits, and he figured there was no way anyone would ever find it there. And he was mostly right. Nobody had bothered to look in the pits prior to this point. But after they get Roy's tip, the police search the stinky, smelly grounds and they find the gun.
Oh my gosh.
The problem is that the chemicals at the tar pits are very corrosive and the firearm at this point is badly damaged. There's no way to prove that this is the same that had Fred. For all the police know, he's making things up to hurt Dolly. He's offended that she's broke up with him, and this might have come from somewhere else entirely. Except this story about the police finding a firearm at the tar pits makes it on the news. And one of Dolly's neighbors actually sees the story, and this inspires them to go to the police with another tip. They come in and say, Dolly has a second that she's also trying to get rid of. She gave it to this neighbor and the neighbor buried it in their yard for her. So a search team goes straight to this neighbor's house, digs in the spot they described, and sure enough, they find a buried in this hole. Unfortunately, this one is just as corroded as the one from the tar pits. All those months sitting in a damp hole meant it was rusty and worn down, and there's still nothing to prove it had anything to do with Fred's. It's definitely suspicious.
Yeah, it seems pretty obvious.